Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Friends Lecture Series. My name is Barbara Proschel, and I'm the president of the Friends. I'm very excited to see such a full house tonight, and thank you for coming. So, we are in for such a treat tonight on this very dreary day with our special guest and speaker, award-winning fiber artist, Bisa Butler. But first, yeah, no, we're all very excited to hear from her. But first, we have to have a word from our sponsor. So, this lecture is brought to you by the Friends of the Minneapolis Institute of Art with generous support from the Mark and Mary Goff Fiterman Fund. And up on the slide, you'll see some of our upcoming Friends events. We have a book club on the 16th with a discussion as well as a guided tour of related art objects. And on that same day, we actually have an outing to the Museum of Russian Art. And during that time, we'll actually have one of the artists on hand to help lead that tour. So our March lecture, put this in your calendar, March 14th, also at 6 p.m., will be LaToya Ruby Frazier, a visual artist and photographer, and you won't want to miss that. It's going to be another great lecture. Lastly, following this lecture, we'll have a short reception in the Wells Fargo room, which is on the main floor, close to the main entrance. And now I'd like to introduce Dennis Michael John, who will in turn introduce Bisa Butler. So Dennis Michael John is Associate Curator of Contemporary Art here at MIA. He has more than 30 years of museum-based experience as a curator, art historian, researcher, and educator. He is a specialist in post-war and contemporary drawings, collage, assemblage, edition prints, and artists' books, and has organized and managed more than 70 exhibitions. So please help me welcome Dennis Michael John.
Thank you, Barbara, for that kind introduction. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to MIA. And as Barbara mentioned, thanks for coming out on this blustery evening. I've been indoors all day, but I looked out the window and first of all, it doesn't look like winter. It looks like a late spring storm, but delighted you're here. And it is my delight to have the honor of introducing tonight's speaker, fiber artist, Bisa Butler. Born in Orange, New Jersey, Bisa grew up in nearby South Orange, the daughter of educators. She was the youngest of 4 children. Formally trained, Bisa studied at Howard University in Washington, D.C., graduating with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in painting, and earned her Master of Arts degree in Arts Education at Montclair State University, New Jersey. It was at Montclair that Bisa enrolled in a fiber art class that inspired her pursuit of quilting as an artistic medium. Along with being a practicing artist and parent, raising 2 children with her husband, John. Bisa is the recipient of several national fellowship awards and recognitions, including the prestigious United States Artist Fellowship in 2021, the Gordon Parks Foundation Fellowship in 2022, and a Doctor of Letters honorary degree from Bloomfield College of Montclair State University, also in 2022. Bisa has exhibited her work in group and solo exhibitions across the United States, as well as China, England, Japan, and South Africa. Prominent among these was the 2021 solo exhibition, Bisa Butler Portraits, presented at the Art Institute of Chicago, the second stop of a traveling exhibition which began at the Katona Museum of Art outside New York City. More recently, in 2023, her work was the focus of solo presentations at the Gordon Parks Foundation in Pleasantville, New York, and the Jeffrey Deitch Gallery in New York City. Bisa's work has been collected by museums and institutions across the United States, including the National Museum of African American Art and Culture and the Smithsonian American Art Museum, both located in Washington, D.C. Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, Newark Museum of Art, Perez Art Museum, Miami, Orlando Museum of Art, Toledo Museum of Art, Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, the Art Institute of Chicago, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and of course, the Minneapolis Institute of Art. With the acquisition of Bisa's quilted and applique textile, I know why the caged bird sings. This work is currently on view in Gallery 322 on the third floor of the museum's east wing, kind of that direction. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to see this extraordinary quilt after tonight's lecture. Bisa's vivid portrayals of Black life and culture have reimagined the medium and genre of quilt making. Through her depictions of everyday people and notable historical figures, Bisa aims to, in her own words, tell stories that may have been forgotten over time. Taking a painterly approach to her textiles, she animates her subjects using unique blends of colorful, patterned, and textured fabrics. Her luminous compositions convey psychological depth, symbolic associations, and a potent, spirited energy. In tonight's lecture, Bisa will explore her inspirations for creating portraits of women who were and are the pillars of their communities, leading families and businesses as well as social, educational, and political engagement. She will discuss her work, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, along with other works such as her portraits of Me Too movement founder Tarana Burke, science fiction writer Octavia Butler, and Kenyan environmental activist Wangari Maathai. Would you please join me in welcoming Bisa Butler?
Thank you all for that beautiful applause. And thank you, Dennis, for that amazing introduction. I also want to excuse myself. I have a cough drop in. I have this cough that won't go away, so I'm going to keep it there so that I don't cough while we're talking. I want to thank all of you who came out on this rainy, dreary day. Thank you to the Friends of Minneapolis Institute of Art. Thanks, Meg and Barbara. All of you all, you have made me feel like I have friends here as well. Thank you to the staff and the curators here at Minneapolis Institute of Art. And I want to shout out my Howard sister, Lynn Farmer, also for making me feel welcome. My lecture this evening, I say lecture, but it's really going to be more like a conversation. And I want to talk to you all a little bit about how I got started, and I'll do that quickly because I really want to get to the good stuff. So, the name of my lecture, when I was speaking with Meg earlier, I thought about what really inspired me. And people ask me that a lot. How did you get here? And how I got here had to start with my grandparents and my earliest memories. So, this is a portrait of my very first quilted artwork, and on one side, and then my grandparents' portrait before they were married, sometime around 1932 in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this was a final project in grad school. And I was taking a fiber arts class and I decided to make a portrait. My professor said, you can do whatever you want. You can quilt, you can knit, you can make crochet, you can felt, but she wanted some sort of application with fibers. And I thought, okay, well, I made portraits at Howard. Why don't I try a portrait out of cloth of my grandparents? My grandmother's name was Violet, and my grandfather was Francis. So this was my very first exploration with how do I define somebody in cloth, not just on what they look like, but what is their inner personality. And so this represents the beginning of me having my own artistic philosophy. And then now I'm going to show a photograph of my grandmother on my father's side. My father is from Ghana, West Africa. And the woman in the center, she's seated on a chair. That's my grandmother, Amina. And I never got to meet her. This is the last surviving photo of her. And my father is the little boy who's standing up by her side. And if you can see it, he's holding something in his hands, which is a little tennis ball. He loved football. Now, you know, in Africa, they have a different football. And as you can see, he's not wearing shoes. Many of them are not wearing shoes. And so that meant he played football with the tennis ball. And my father was a bright student. He ended up moving to the United States on an academic scholarship to Seton Hall University. And there he became the captain of the soccer team because of that tennis ball and those bare feet. And the portrait I made for him was upon him retiring after being a college president for 29 years. So I made a portrait of him, and then the border is surrounded with kente cloth, which is native to Ghana, and then photographs of the family, the grandchildren, pictures of him during college. And the cloth that I used for this particular piece, I used fabric from family members. I asked everybody to contribute a piece. So I have, excuse me, my stepmother's veil is stitched in there. My brother-in-law's police uniform is on my father, the shorts. That's like the blue uniform. You see the little button. There's tie-dyes from my childhood in the 70s. And yes, we mostly wore tie-dyes. So this is a portrait of me and my mother and my sister at my very first art show. I had a solo exhibition at Essex County College. That was the school where my father was president. No nepotism was involved there. And I had a show. And this was another take on a portrait of my grandparents, Francis and Violet. And then I got a scholarship to go to this school called Howard University. It's in the heart of Washington, D.C., historically Black. It's been in the news lately. Kamala Harris went to Howard University. Chadwick Boseman graduated from Howard University. Felicia Rashad. HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities, graduate, I think it's near almost 75% of professional degree African Americans in this country. So a lot of the doctors and lawyers that you come across, you'll find a HBCU in their background. It tends to be a smaller classroom environment, and you tend to have professors who may understand your background because maybe your background is like theirs, not just racially, it could be economically. There's a lot of foreign national students at HBCUs that come from the West Indies and come from Africa. So your professors understand you in a way, and they understand what it's like to have to strive and how important education is. So this is on one half of the screen, the young woman with the blue wrap. That's something that I did in class. It was a study. And on the other side is a famous portrait by Wadsworth Gerald, who taught at Howard. He was not my professor, but I put that there because I wanted you to see where my professors were coming from. A lot of them belonged to an organization called AfriCobra. How many people know AfriCobra in the room? Good number. A good number. The African Coalition of Bad and Relevant Artists. So that really says it all. They were coming from a different philosophy than the standard art school. A lot of my professors got hired from at Howard, when they were in their late 20s. There was a big takeover at Howard University in 1968 where up to that point, Howard had not had a black president and did not teach African or did not have African studies as a major. And in the art classes, the philosophy would have been more like the Beaux-Arts art tradition, trying to adapt and assimilate to the European art tradition, which was common amongst many art schools in the United States. And the students at that time, as we know, the 60s, this was the Black Power movement, and they weren't having it. And they said that the Afro-Cuban movement came out of Chicago. And so these young, fierce, educated people were saying, we want an art philosophy and a manifesto that reflects us. We're cool, we're bad, we're relevant. Um, we want our artwork to speak to the people. What is it that needs to be said in the 60s? Even simple things like Black is beautiful. Nowadays, some people are disturbed by comments like that or they feel afraid of it, but they don't understand that the meaning and the purpose was many Black people did not and were not taught that Black was beautiful. When you looked in the mirror, sometimes you saw somebody who you did not like and you wish that you looked different. So their philosophy was that when Black people look at art, they should feel good about themselves. They should see broad noses and full lips and dark skin and afro hair, and they should feel good about the natural way your hair grows. Even now, the Crown Act is I don't know if it's a law or a statute, but it's trying to be passed. It's basically something that says Black people can wear their hair as it is. You don't have to straighten it or press it or flatten it or somehow make it look other than it is, because there are places in schools. Even now, there's a young boy who has been suspended for, I think, 12 months, the whole school year, because he wears his hair in locks. His hair is illegal. If I leave my hair as it is, it'll grow into an afro, but after a while it will lock naturally. It'll just separate itself into locks. So that's the way my hair is. And the Afro-Cobra philosophy was, we don't want that. We want to be able to celebrate our own hair and our own features. And that art should be for everybody. It should not just be for the rich. It should not just be because you can afford it. Everybody should be able to look upon this thing and see something that they find pleasing. So I graduated from school, and this is when I really started thinking about the lecture today in a way, but a long time ago. Like, what is important to me? I was making art on my own. Nobody was buying my art, first of all. Nobody asked me to make this. And I needed to think, what do I want to say? What is important to me? And a lot of artists, you'll see younger artists, sometimes young African American artists might go back to something that they think is their beginning. And I thought about the entrance of many African descendant people in this country and what did that look like and who were those people. Originally, my first quill, if you remember, was my grandmother. But now I'm thinking about, well, I want to be in this art show at a local church. I'm not necessarily going to sell a portrait of my grandmother. So who can I look at? What kind of images am I interested in? I started looking online and I came across this photograph by Prentice Polk. He was the staff or local photographer at Tuskegee University. He was very well known. He photographed the community. People sat for him. And he photographed ordinary people in the community that were not considered rich or famous or fabulous. And this woman, she's something, first of all. Thank you, Mr. Polk, for even, I can't imagine he even approached her. Does she look like, how do you say that? And this is in 1932. So this woman, not her, but her parents most likely were enslaved people. And by her clothes, I'm going to say that she's either a sharecropper or she works as a domestic person. And she's not wearing the holes in her sweater because it's style. Those were worn that way. And I was really interested in capturing images like Mr. Polk. Who are the people that were left behind and forgotten? And his title for the piece was The Boss. So I wanted to make a portrait of the boss and then create fabric or choose fabrics that went along with what I thought she might come across in her lifetime. And even what she was wearing, the wool, the burlap, the denim, the linen. I tried to use all natural fibers because at that time in the 30s, what she would have been exposed to would not have been a lot of man-made materials. And I used the African cloth. That's a nod to my heritage from Ghana. And it's also a nod to my professors who spoke about Black people being proud of who they are, and that this woman, yes, she's in the United States, she's born and bred. Her labor helped build the economy of this country, but her story didn't start as a laborer. She was once, or her ancestors were African people. So the cloth talks about there's something that's before that. She comes from a legacy, and that legacy may not be known to her, but she wears it proudly. And then here we are at this beautiful portrait. Some of you might recognize it. It was taken by Thomas Askew in 1900. These are four, the title that I saw said four young women on the steps of Atlanta University. And they are so bad. I mean, look at them. If anybody has ever seen a breaking freeze frame, when the guys are spinning and then they freeze, like that came from somewhere. Nothing is new. Everything has been taught. And I saw these four beautiful young women. I'm looking at the date, 1900. And I'm thinking about Atlanta in 1900. They're at university. And it may be graduation. I don't know the occasion. But in 1906, that was the massacre in Atlanta, where the Black community was terrorized. And I think over 100 people were murdered because this is after Reconstruction. Now we're talking, what, 30 years post slavery. And these young women are going to school and they're doing well. Their families are prominent. And that was a threat. Now, because you have a new workforce. If you were comfortable in your workforce, most Black people were enslaved. Now suddenly you have millions of people coming in and taking jobs. Sound familiar? I've heard this story before. And this is my version. And I call my piece, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, off of Dr. Maya Angelou's book. And it's also referencing the original poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, where he says, I know why the cage bird sings. I know why he beats his wings. So it's a bird in a cage, but it still sings. It's not going to attract a mate. There's no mate to be found. It can't fly out, but this bird longs to be free. And I thought about these young women, what they represented to their families, to the community. And I'm referencing a lot of things here. When you see the four of them, and I was staring at the original photo, I was thinking about who are they? What's the personality? There's a popular meme of like a bunch of women and it says, which friend are you? Are you the funny one? Are you the one who's going to cause a fight at the end of the night? Are you the peacemaker? Are you the sweetheart? Are you the intellectual? Like, which one are you? And each of the women had these distinct looks on their faces. And I'm always trying to think about who are these people? What would it be like if I was on the steps with them? And I used the fabric to talk about their personalities. The first young woman, the diamonds in her skirt That's because she's the fancy one. You know those friends, they have to have diamonds and gold. They don't have money, but they have diamonds. The second young woman, the hearts on her skirt, I thought that she just looked sweet. Now, I don't know, but I'm thinking she's the sweet one. She's the one who you might, if you want to talk to that group, you better talk to her first. Then the third young woman with the fans, she's wearing the caged bird on her sleeve. And if you look closely, the bird is actually lower on her sleeve. The bird is flying out. And that's like my comment. I can't stand to just watch that bird in there. It has to be let out. So it's kind of flying off of her. And her skirt has the fans. In the African marketplaces, if you have, well, first of all, the average temperature, we were going to go to Ghana this past December. The average temperature, I think, was 90 to 106. So it's hot. If you want to go shopping in the marketplace, you need to go before noon and you need to be prepared for the heat. But if one of those shops or those stalls have a fan, you're more likely to spend a longer time in that shop. And that shop is going to attract more customers, and those customers are going to spend their money sitting in front of that fan. So the fan, that fabric, that symbol represents economic wealth, prosperity. And then the last young woman, those red heels on her skirt, that particular fabric was designed in 20, I think 2009, when the Obamas visited Ghana. And when Michelle Obama stepped off of Air Force One and she had those heels on, the African women were like, yes, she's one of us. And I wanted that to show that she's the fly one, but she's also, these women are the four mothers of Michelle. They're graduating from college, and she's a graduate of Princeton. She's a highly educated woman. She would not have been able to be there if not for these women and the sacrifices they made. And the last thing I'll say about this is that my girlfriends call this the judgmental aunties at the church picnic. They're judging and they're not happy. And I just wanted you to see them closer. And I included this one because I wanted to show. Last night, one of their friends asked me what happened and how, first of all, how long does everything take? And I can take 2 hours, each eye, 2 hours. The nose is 2 hours. The lips are 2 hours. Her ears are 2 hours. The hair, each part is a labor intensive thing. And so this young woman, I did her at one point and I thought, okay, I think I'm done. And I was really unhappy with the way she looked. But that's a whole week of work that I just, it just wasn't right. I can't, well, you all can see it. People always say I'm too hard on myself, but she just wasn't giving. And so I had to do her again. And I had to take more time with it to really tap into what is it that I'm seeing and feeling with this. And this, I'm sure a lot of you may have known her or may have seen this portrait, Miss Ella Watson. And I saw this portrait today. I was given a lovely tour by the curator, Casey. And she took me and my husband and Meg, she took us through and talked to us about the great photographer Gordon Parks and his connection to Ella Watson and the portrait that he created of Miss Watson based on his interactions with her. And I thought it fits so perfectly with this conversation tonight about women who lead, women who are the backbone of the community, women who sacrifice. Ella Watson was a mother, grandmother, and great grandmother, and she worked at the administration buildings of the Farm Security administration where Gordon Parks was a young photographer, and he was seeking truth and realness in his work. And his supervisor, boss, told him to choose somebody, find a subject that is personal to you. And he was struggling and then realized that the woman who cleans the offices every night was somebody who was very interesting. And he sat down and spoke to her one night without taking her photo and having a conversation where she talked to him about her life, being a young teenage mother, and her husband died, I think, while she was pregnant with her second child, and how dedicated she was to her church and to her family, and how much she had sacrificed for them, but how much joy and love she got out of taking care of people. And I thought I had to include her in this lecture because she's exactly what I mean by a person who leads from behind. You don't see people like this, but they are pushing you and they're pushing the world forward. And then I wanted to share my take on some of Gordon Parks' beautiful photographs. I received a Gordon Parks Fellowship last year, and I was so struck by his portrait that he called Department Store 1956 of a young woman and her niece. So that's an aunt and a niece. And they're out in what could seemingly be like a beautiful afternoon. They have on these elegant clothes, the lace, her heels, her purse, even her earring. Everything is flawless. But when you look deeply at it, you see that there's some indecision on the young woman's face. And glaring above her head, Gordon Parks was a master photographer at framing. If you look at the sign above her head, the colored entrance sign is almost bigger than they are. So this beautiful afternoon, and this is Kodachrome, beautiful soft color photos, where everything seems so genteel and more of like the myth of the South. But then above their heads is this neon colored entrance sign. And the moment of indecision there is she has her niece out. She's very young. I don't know if she can read. I don't know if she understands segregation. And I like to think about, what is the subject thinking? Is it her place to take her niece inside the back entrance when she's obviously told her they're having a special night or a special day? Is it her job to burst the bubble of innocence that could surround her niece? Does she go in or does she not? And Gordon Parks also made sure he had them standing right by that open doorway that's kind of looming dark. Are you going to accept and show your niece that you are considered less than equal? Or do you leave and make something up? And I did a quilted version of it. On my end, I wanted to include those soft pastel colors. And I didn't want to include the colored entrance sign, but I knew that I had to because I don't want to give a lie to what happened there. And before I move to the next slide, I just want to say that the family that posed for these portraits, this was a whole life spread, the segregation story. But I think many of their family members had to leave town. This young woman was a teacher, but some of them couldn't teach anymore. They were fired from their districts for showing what the South was. And then I did this portrait as well. Gordon Parks, he just called this one Mobile, Alabama, 1956. And I wanted to do a version of it where I zeroed in on that mother and child and the mother's protectiveness over the child. Gordon Parks is photographing these people at their church gathering, but this young mother is thoroughly annoyed with him, I think. And it's really hot. You could see that there's a sweat stain there. And her baby, anybody's ever held a baby on a hot summer day, and her baby's arm, the baby's not helping at all. So I wanted to show this piece and give an homage to Gordon Parks. And that fabric that I use in the background, that fabric is known in West Africa as the fleur de mariage. So that's a wedding flower fabric. It's given as part of a dowry. When you get married, you're supposed to have 6 yards of that fabric given to the family. So I wanted that all around her. This portrait is a young lady I think we all know, Miss Harriet Tubman. If I'm not wrong, I think it was taken around 1868. And I think this portrait was only discovered around 2019. It belongs to a collection by Emily Howland, and she was an abolitionist, a white woman, and people gave carte de visite to friends, so they think that she received Harriet Tubman's carte de visite as a gift, like something you give to a friend of yours. And this, I saw the portrait during pandemic, and I thought about, for the first time I saw Harriet differently. We always see Harriet Tubman as old, very old. This time I saw Harriet at almost the same age I was at the time. And I got to learn her more. What is the motivation behind a woman like her? What makes you go back after you've been freed and help other people? Some stories say that she may have freed up to 300 people, but that she put herself on the line again and again. So in my portrait of her, the background, I'm often setting a scene. And those are sunflowers in a dark night sky. And I was thinking about many things, her running at night, her having to be covert. The sunflower is known as a devotional flower. If you've ever planted one or seen one, they move as the sun moves. And it looks like the flower is devoted to the sun. And Harriet Tubman was a deeply Christian woman, and she said that she heard the voice of God telling her where to run and which way to go. So I wanted to include that. The fabrics that I used on her skirt were made by a group of women in the Congo, and these group of women live in a refuge for women who have suffered violence by war. There have been sexual crimes committed against them. Some of them have children by the soldiers or guerrilla soldiers, and they can't always go home again. Even in this country, though, sometimes survivors of sexual assault are looked at as the guilty ones. And the refuge that they live in is called the City of Joy. And the City of Joy, these women get educational classes, they get health care, child care, and the fabric company that I shop from a lot is called Vlisco. It's a Dutch company. And they wanted to do a fashion show for the women at the City of Joy. Everybody gets a custom outfit. And the women enjoyed it, but then they asked them, is there anything else we can do for you? And the women said that they wanted to design fabric themselves. And they wanted to sell their own fabrics. And they wanted to be like the designers. It's nice to look cute on a day, but they want to have a vocation and a way to feed their families. And so the fabric that I used in this piece is from the City of Joy. The bottom of her skirt, you'll see like waves. That's water, and it's supposed to represent when they were going through the turmoil. And then there's like a thicket of leaves and vegetation. That's them as they pass through the jungle. And when you get to the top of her skirt, you could see there's more flowers, there's a sun, there's birds, and that's them reaching the City of Joy. And I thought that that would be a beautiful companion or comparison to Harriet Tubman's struggles through life, even though these women are separated by over 100 years in their struggles. And her face, I often use blues and reds. I use bright, intense colors. I'm referencing my Afro-Cobra professors in that philosophy of using intense color, but the color represents the emotion. So Harriet Tubman being somebody, she was known as the general, and she was one of the, if not the first women to to work as a part of the army. She was not, I don't think she was an official commissioned soldier, but she did get a war commission after. She worked with the, I was going to say the US Army, but I think I might be getting that wrong because this is in the middle of the Civil War. So I guess the Northern Army. She also was a woman who had to be very covert. I've heard stories about her riding trains at night, or in the daytime, excuse me, broad daylight. There was a story about her with a newspaper, but I think the newspaper was upside down, but she was pretending to read it. So she has to be at the same time silent and very quiet, almost invisible in a crowd. But then at other times, we know Harriet carried that gun. So she had to be extremely fierce and powerful. So in her coloring, I'm saying something about her personality and the life she led. And I'm also saying something to people of color. As Black people, we are we are Americans. So Black Americans or naturalized Americans. And we're a part of this system where color denotes your rank in society. And then it's broken down in our community, and it's more public nowadays talking about colorism, and that the lighter the person is in the times of slavery, if you were very light skinned, you were most likely the child of the person who owned you. So that child might be getting special privileges, better food, better place to sleep. Looks like the master, treated by this is a relative. And so that person is looked at as better. And then the people who are not, the darker people, would be treated worse out in the fields. This person is not good enough because their proximity to white was not close enough. And that persists in today's age. If you go look online and just Google beautiful Black woman and just count how many women you see that look anywhere near my complexion, it's not going to be a lot. I think Beyonce is beautiful. I do, but I also think that there are other women in other darker complexions that are beautiful. And me myself, I have a sister who's almost like a twin. We're 11 months apart. She's light and I'm dark, but we look very much alike. And it was a good lesson for us to be born in that family, in our family, because we had to see each other and realize that we're the same constantly, even though we were treated differently and probably still are treated differently in crowds. I wanted to show a few of the women who I admire. I'm always looking at the answers. Like, I don't feel like I have the answers, but I want them. Who are the women who I admire? Who do I want to be like? And I was selected to create the Guardian of the Year portrait of Portia Bennett Bay. And she's an activist, a Black Lives Matter activist, and Time Magazine chose her for the cover. And they asked me to create a portrait of her. Um, I also did a cover for Essence Magazine, and they asked me to create a portrait of a lesser known young woman. She's a rapper named Nyla, and but they didn't want her to be a known person. They wanted the portrait to represent the year that changed everything. And what does that look like to me? So I included portraits and images from the news on her shirt. And I know that you all here, this is the home of George Floyd. And I wanted to make sure that his image was a part of that cover, and and also include Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and some of the signs that we're seeing, so that people can see that this was a part of a wider movement and they were connected. And what does that mean? And then the last is a portrait of Wangari Maathai that Dennis mentioned. She's the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. She was a environmental activist and a political activist, and she passed in the mid 2000s. I included this because Tarana Burke had asked me to create the portrait for her first, is it a biography or memoir, Unbound. And Tarana Burke, I'm sure you all know, she's the founder of the Me Too movement. And originally, the Me Too movement, she worked with young women in a community organization, and these young women have been victimized, and she wanted them to be able to have a voice to speak up about what had happened to them and point the fingers at at those who had done the crimes rather than pointing the fingers at themselves and feeling that they had done something wrong. And Tarana Burke, she just also inspires me. So a lot of times you'll see those birds again. You'll see the cage bird under, because I want to say something with the fabric about her being free. I did a portrait of Octavia Butler for the New York Times Arts and Leisure. And Octavia Butler was one of the first, if not the first, prominently known African American science fiction writer, female science fiction writer. And Octavia Butler always inspired me because she dreamed of worlds outside of our own. And she was really prolific. If you look at some of her writings, some of the things she said have come to pass. She imagined a president who wanted to make America strong. It wasn't Make America Great Again, but she, in one of her books, talks about a president similar to President Trump. And she also talked about things that have happened in our environment, like the COVID pandemic. And people asked her she died in the early 2000s. People asked her, like, well, where are you getting these visions from? And how do you see this? And she said, I'm not getting any visions. I'm looking at the world, looking at our world in the news, and just playing out these scenarios to the extreme and seeing what happens if you let it go. The environmental crisis, there's all kinds of fires as she talks about in her books, but she really was a woman who thought of the future and what's going to happen, what could happen if you let it go unchecked. And on her, I'm using fabric again here to talk about her books. So in the corner, you'll see that strange little baby figure on her shoulder, but she talks about like xenogenesis and plants and outer space. So I'm giving hints to the inner workings. And in her hair, I'm using glitter and Austrian crystals to give like a nod to the heavens. And I put this piece here not because I know this couple or that this woman is a prominent person, but something that's really important to me is the beauty of ordinary people. People who work, people who suffer, people who love, people who laugh, but they don't have to be any sort of famous person to be valuable. And I'm using fabric again to tell the story of this couple. If you look at her collar, you'll see those babies. And then on one side of the collar, you see little chicks and eggs. That fabric in Africa is called not women, children are worth more than gold. And I thought about her as the matriarch of the family and how valuable her children are to her grandchildren. And her buttons on her shirt, you can't see it, but they're little lactating breasts. She's the nurturer. And on her sleeves, that shape, that fabric is called pain chaud or hot bread. She's the one who's cooking and providing for the family. And her husband, that's Pop Pop to me. He's wearing a shirt. I made this during the pandemic. The label on his shirt, it says Prenez soin de vous, which is take care of you. And that was the phrase that was used in Africa. Here in the States, I think we were saying like stay safe, safe distance, or wear a mask, be careful. But I was thinking of prenez soin de vous, like take care of you, take care of your elderly, take care of you, your person, your health is valuable, take care of yourself, take care of each other. So that's me talking to everyone else. And then also my father is older now too. He's 85. So I'm thinking about the world, and I'm thinking about my own father, and like I want him to be taken care of. I included this piece, The Equestrian. Um, I'm going to go through quickly because we're almost done. But The Equestrian was based off of a photograph of Salika Lizevsky. She's a young woman who lived in Paris. And I don't know that she's an equestrian, but she has the riding crop and she has that posture. And there's a lot of mysteries about Salika Lizevsky. I think her name was on the back. And that name, Lizevsky, I think it's Hungarian, and some, not me, but some researchers looked her up, and they found that name was the name of a family that did circus tricks, but with horses. So was she married to Lizevsky? Was she adopted child? I don't really know, but I thought that her bearing was so regal and beautiful. And I also love images like this because they tell a story that hasn't been told. Did I know that there was these black people in Paris riding horses at that time? No, and I probably a lot of us did not. I included this because it's a recent work. It's the dynamic trio, Salt and Pepper. I made this portrait last year, and it was exhibited at Art Basel, Miami. Um, and it was my husband John who came up with this. He's a hip hop DJ. And the theme of the booth, I was exhibiting with the Jeffrey Deitch Gallery, and they said the theme of the booth is goddesses. So I wanted to think of who is a goddess to me. Me, a young woman who came up in the 80s and was a child of hip hop. Salt and Pepper were the goddesses. And this is the first time that I was able to use symbols and iconography of my time and of my era. So you'll see the door knocker earrings that's on their pants. That was something that was very popular with young Black and Puerto Rican women, inner city women. They had the giant gold rope chains. We called them Dookie Fat gold rope chains. Um, and the army print was something that was giving a nod to Destiny's Child, I'm a Survivor. And then the lyrics of their songs I stitched into the background. I used a lot of vinyl in this piece. And I want to use fabric that talks about them, the 80s. We have a lot of man made fabrics, a lot of vinyl and polyester and metallic. So I wanted to use the cloth to describe them. Salt is the young woman in blue with the blue face, because I was thinking of Salt color, and she could be the cool one. Pepper is the red face, and she raps sometimes, so she's like hot like the flames. And then in the center, Spinderella, she's the DJ. I put her in purple because she's the combination of the red and the blue. And then this is just them up close, so you could see some of the symbols that I'm using: the Black Power fist, the box radio, what do we call it? The boom boxes, the radios, the kente cloth. Now they did wear the kente cloth. They made a lot of these looks popular. Their hair was called stack. It's like when your hair is cut in layers so that it goes up, up, up. And the thicker your stacks were, the flyer you were. And then I included just a picture of myself by my machine, getting ready to sew. And I don't usually sew in a suit and heels, but I thought I'd add that in there. And I added that also because I like to think of myself as a woman who leads. I'm a mother of two girls who are 24 and 28. And I come from a long line of women, a long line of men as well. But that's not the topic of this lecture. And I'm going to thank you all for listening to me. I think we have time for questions. Sorry. Yes. I did not. This was made by Christy Brown. She's a designer from Ghana. I just love her stuff, so you can find it online. Yeah.
I have a question about your first quote that you brought up, that big bird thing. So in the photograph, many of the women are not looking at the camera; they're looking away.
Yes.
You made the artistic decision to have all four women engage with the viewer.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that artistic decision.
I find that when I'm working on these pieces, that it's like I'm having a conversation with somebody that I never thought I would be able to. And I almost feel like I need a permission in a way. It's not that I'm like not praying or anything like that, but I'm thinking very deeply about the subject and I'm trying to learn something. And I find that when they're looking at me, it feels like the communication is more open. If the eyes are the window, then I'm looking at them. And I also feel that they're looking at me. There are some things that will happen in my life sometimes where I'm working on a piece that let me know sort of if I have the nod of approval or not. So I find that the direct gaze, it really gets you. It's hard to walk by when they're watching you walk away.
I'm Kiana, and I just want to say that I really appreciate you being here and thank you for your light, your time, and your energy. And I created a gift for you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Hand stitching? Is it all machine? Is it a combination?
It's all machine.
Okay.
One of my quilts, they can take like 100 hours, 160 hours. I had a piece that I did of 9 life-size men. That took me, I don't know, it took 9 months. Each one was a month. I just don't think I would ever get it done with hand sewing. But I love hand sewing. I find it so beautiful, and I like it because it's quiet. Yes.
I saw your exhibit in Chicago, and I desperately wanted to know what is on the back of the quilts.
I wish I included a picture. It looks like a line drawing. Oh, you can see all the stitching in the back. Yeah. It's one cloth. I usually try to use something heavy, like canvas, or sometimes I use a decorative cloth. But it's really just it's like a relief drawing on the backside. I will. I will. That's a very good thing. I'll do that. I think I see somewhere.
Thank you. My name's Alexandria, and I haven't gotten to see any of your pieces yet. I'm so excited to see the one that's here. But I was wondering how you do the shading, like in the skirts
Mm-hmm.
with the same cloth.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered.
Yes. Nice to meet you, and
You as
thank
well.
you.
Thank you.
I'm using pieces of organza and chiffon. I'm using tulle netting. That was a technique that I just, because I come from a painter's background, I couldn't just mix any deeper shades. And I couldn't just add a shadow by adding a contrast color or anything darker. And I started experimenting layering with shears. And I thought like, oh, I can layer a lot of, and the fabric is thinner. So if I have 15 layers on there, it's not too bulky because they're thin. So that came, I made my first quilt in 2001, and I was teaching and working and not really selling a quilt for more than maybe $1,000 all the way up to like 2017. So all that time I was working in a bubble in a way. I had people who bought my work, but not for lots of money. These are people who knew me or were friends of the family. So they weren't critiquing and judging, but I was able to develop a technique without thinking about a market. Is this sellable? Will somebody like it? I tried though. Some people told me they didn't like it. So yes. Yeah. Are you?
Yes, my grandfather was from Beaufort, South Carolina,
Oh,
St. Helena Island.
fantastic.
So I love that piece and was just curious about the inspiration for that piece.
I was actually, that was the book that you got me yesterday. There was a beautiful portrait that I saw of a young woman, and she looked like she was graduating from school, but I didn't have any information about her. Just that she had a stunning dark skin and bright eyes. And something about her portrait spoke to me. And while I was at Howard, I saw the movie Daughters of the Dust by, is it Julie?
Julie Dash.
Julie Dash. And that movie had like a profound effect on me, seeing women who look like myself presented in a way that was not typical of Hollywood. And so that was sort of the inspiration, like a nod to the movie and then a nod to this beautiful young girl that I felt like she should be acknowledged. And the portrait, the photographer, if I'm not mistaken, is from South Carolina. Yeah. So I wanted that connection that she could be one of these descendants of the island people.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Sina Hodges, and it's really, really wonderful to have you here and to hear from you a first person account about your art and your life. My curiosity is around, you talked a little bit about, you showed us your first piece, but I recently had a conversation with an artist who said to me that he grew up in a time where he was writing on slates in school, or supposed to be.
Yes.
But instead of writing on slates, he was drawing.
Yes.
This artist is El Natsui.
Oh, wow. I love his artwork.
And so my question for you is, when did it start for you?
Mhm.
What was first? Did you draw? Were you sewing?
Mhm.
How old were you?
I think they're kind of concurrent. I started drawing when I was small, like a toddler, when all the other kids were drawing too. But as you get older, different interests pull your way. So when the other kids were wanting to like learn a sport or, I don't know, do something else that I still like to draw. So I did that from childhood. I think I won Artist of the Month when I was like 4, and I was like, yes, this is destiny. But I didn't understand time. And at the end of the month, I remember seeing the board. I couldn't read Artist of the Month, but I knew my name would always be on the board when I walked in. And it was a different name. And I remember I was so upset because I didn't know what a month was. I thought I was the artist for indefinite. And then I used to ask my mother to sew clothes for my Barbie dolls. My mother sewed all the time. She loved fashion, and she'd be making like a Halston knockoff or Yves Saint Laurent. She was really, really good. And I would ask her to make clothes for my Barbies. And finally, I think I was about 6 when she was like, here's a needle, here's a thread. I am sewing, and I'm going to show you how to sew. And so I would make clothes for my Barbie dolls. So they were kind of neck and neck. But sewing didn't become a permanent part of my life until after grad school. And the drawing and the painting was always there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You see? Oh, here they come. Here they come.
Sorry. I don't really have a lot of questions. I'm so excited to hear you talk because I've been following your work. But I just, I think the first time I caught you on Instagram and so on and seeing all the portraits. But then I get here and I hear the fabric has names. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back through and
Yes.
ask you about the names of other fabrics. So I mean,
Yeah.
do you ever list them, or is it anything, or is there a resource that you've written?
You know what? There should be. And I always think about that there should be like a I Spy,
I don't know.
and have the kids identify certain symbols.
Yeah.
Like I use the jumping horse a lot. That fabric is called Le Coeur de Cheval. The phrase is, I run faster than my enemies. So whenever African women are something else, first of all.
It's
the name is so eloquent.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like to use that a lot on images of people because I feel like these women, they have a lot of enemies.
Yeah.
And I want them to succeed. So I
These
feel
are
like
all from the textiles from the City of Joy, or
no, just different. Actually, some of these fabrics were designed in the 1920s and 30s in Africa, and then companies somebody knocked off somebody 100 years ago, but all the companies make their specific ones. Maybe not Michelle Obama's shoes, but you'll see the fans, the jumping horses. Yeah. They're like certain fabrics that you'll see a lot. Okay. And the more you see those fabrics, it's probably because they've been around a long time, and they're very popular. And they most of those do have names. So if you went to a marketplace in Togo or Cote d'Ivoire and you said, I run faster than my enemies, they know which fabric it is that you're asking for.
I would love that.
Resource. There's a funny one that my husband hates. It has a pattern on it, but anyway, I don't know why, or maybe I do know why, but it's just a zigzag pattern, but the women call it "Men Are Not Loyal." I don't know. I think the men need to answer, why is it called that? I don't think I have it, but yeah. And he actually bought the shirt. He didn't know a company made this lovely shirt, nice collar. And then I looked at the pattern and I was like, you know what that is? I think we're wrapping up. Is there a last question? There's one more.
It's not so much a question, but a thank you, really. I'm African, I'm Nigerian, so we're neighbours.
Yes.
And to see our materials, to see our fabrics, the fabric of my mother and my grandmother and my aunties, and to see it in galleries, when before they were the things that we were supposed to be embarrassed by, the things that we wore at weddings and funerals and all that. It's just beautiful to see.
Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.